Steam curled along the stone floor of Carlisle Station like restless ghosts as morning light filtered through the iron-ribbed roof, giving the world a soft, trembling glow. Lanterns flickered in gold halos above the crowd, each one shimmering through the fog as if reluctant to reveal the truth of the day. Trains hissed and rumbled, their engines pacing like heavy-hearted beasts preparing to flee the city. And through that drifting veil of steam, a young woman ran as if every breath hurt her more than the last. Lady Evelyne Harcourt did not look like a runaway. Her gown, rose-pink silk trimmed with delicate white lace, belonged in a ballroom, not on the cold floors of a public station. The hem, once immaculate, now bore streaks of soot from sprinting across the cobblestones outside. Her hair, arranged hours earlier in an elegant bouquet of pinned curls, had come loose around her temples. But her face, flushed and luminous with fear, carried the truth plainly. She was running not from scandal, but from captivity. Her family's voices still clung to her memory like barbed wire. "It is done," her father had said at dawn. "Lord Ashcombe arrives in 2 days. You will greet him with grace." Her mother's softer voice had tried to soothe the blow, but only sharpened it. "Think of the estate, Evelyne. Think of your sister. We cannot lose everything because she chose recklessness." Recklessness. That was the word her mother had whispered after Evelyne discovered that her sister, beloved, beautiful, envied, had eloped with a sailor under cover of night. Evelyne, the quiet younger daughter, had woken to find her fate rewritten in a single morning. She was now to replace her sister at the altar, as if sisters were interchangeable, as if obedience were the only virtue that mattered in a woman. "No," Evelyne had whispered into the mirror before she fled the house. "I will not be traded like a ledger entry." But her parents had anticipated her panic. Guards had been sent, men loyal to her father, determined to make her return before her absence stained the family name. When she heard the heavy footsteps approaching her chamber, Evelyne climbed out the window, tore her gown on a nail, and ran all the way to the station with nothing but a carpet bag and the ache of betrayal filling her chest. Now, with every hurried stride across the station platform, the world around her blurred. The steam, the shouts, the crackle of coal engines, all of it swallowed her fear until it became one unbroken hum. She ducked behind a cast-iron pillar, pressing a trembling hand against her bodice to steady her breath. But the guards' voices echoed closer. "Check the south platform. She's in a pink dress. She can't be far." Her pulse hammered. She clutched the carpet bag tighter, praying the steam might hide her silhouette for just a moment longer. Then a voice, low, warm, unexpectedly gentle, spoke beside her. "My lady," the stranger murmured, "I believe someone is pursuing you." She startled, turning sharply. Standing beside her was a man whose presence quieted the station's noise, as though even chaos paused to look his way. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black Victorian frock coat, his dark cravat tied with a precision that suggested discipline rather than vanity. His hair, tousled by the morning wind, softened the strong lines of his face. But it was his eyes, steady, perceptive, deeply human, that steadied her breath. The Duke of Ravenswood. She recognized him instantly. Everyone did. He was the kind of nobleman whose reputation preceded him in whispers, a man who carried power as quietly as one carried a candle in a storm. Evelyne tried to step away, unwilling to entangle an innocent man in her disgrace. But her foot slipped against the tiled floor, and the Duke reached out instinctively, catching her by the arm. "Forgive me," he said. "I only meant to keep you from falling." His voice held no presumption, no ownership, just awareness. And something else, something almost like concern. "I must go," she whispered, but her voice trembled. "Please, sir, forget you saw me." "I fear that is no longer possible," he replied quietly, tilting his head toward the open concourse. Her pursuers had spotted the flash of her rose gown through the thinning steam. "There," one shouted. Without hesitation, without even waiting for her permission, the Duke stepped closer, shielding her with the breadth of his coat. "If you wish to leave this place," he murmured, his voice steady even as the air thickened with danger, "you would do well to run with someone who knows how to outrun scandal." She stared at him, startled by the unexpected refuge in his words. The guards broke into a sprint, and the Duke offered his hand, not as a command, but as a promise. Evelyne took it. The moment their palms touched, the station seemed to ignite with motion. They ran together, weaving between trunks and startled passengers, her gown billowing behind her like a rose petal caught in a winter gust. Steam burst along the tracks as a departing train hissed, swallowing them in a white cloud as they slipped past a lamppost lit with molten gold. The Duke moved with startling certainty, tugging her through the thick fog toward a side platform. Evelyne kept pace despite the weight of her silk skirts, her heart pounding not only from fear, but from the bewildering fact that a duke, a man born into power, ran beside her as though her fate mattered to him personally. Their footsteps echoed like drumbeats in the vaulted hall, chased by the shouts behind them. "Stop her! Don't let her reach the carriages." When they burst into the cold morning air outside the station, Evelyne staggered, breathless. The Duke steadied her again, his hand gentle but firm at her waist. "You are safe for the moment," he said. But Evelyne shook her head, tears gathering hot behind her eyes. No one is ever safe from a family determined to sell their daughter. The Duke went still. Something darkened in his expression, not judgment, but fury held deep and quiet beneath his refined composure. "Then you are running from far more than scandal," he said softly. Evelyne's breath caught. She had not meant to reveal so much. The cold wind whipped against them, carrying the distant voices of the men who still searched for her. The Duke lifted his gaze toward the street where a carriage waited. "My lady," he murmured, turning back to her with a calm intensity that made her chest tighten. "Whether you mean to or not, you have found someone willing to stand between you and whatever binds you." She stared at him. This stranger, this Duke, this man who moved like a shield between her and the world she feared. Then, from the platform behind them, a furious voice rang out through the steam. "Evelyne Harcourt, by order of your father, you are to return immediately." The guards were closer than she had realized. Evelyne froze, and the Duke, eyes narrowing with quiet, defiant certainty, whispered one sentence that changed the ground beneath her feet. "Run with me, or be taken back to the life you fled." The Duke led Evelyne down a narrow corridor behind the station, where the world dimmed into a hush that felt almost intimate. The echo of their footsteps softened beneath the vaulted beams, as if even the walls wished to protect her secret. A final cloud of steam drifted past them, veiling their escape for a heartbeat. Evelyne pressed a hand to her ribs, breath trembling, her gown clinging to her legs where the morning fog had left it damp. She could still hear the guards shouting her name, but their voices now felt distant, swallowed by the Duke's steady presence beside her. He did not release her hand until he was certain they could not be seen from the platform. Only then did he turn to her fully, studying her face with eyes sharpened not by curiosity, but by concern. "Your pursuers are determined," he said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to steady the air itself. "They hunt you with the persistence of men acting under strict orders." The words pierced her. She looked down, ashamed of what she had dragged him into. "I did not intend for anyone to become involved," she whispered. "I simply wished to leave the life they forced upon me." "And who is that?" he asked softly. Her throat tightened. For a moment she could not speak. The truth sat heavy inside her chest, raw and humiliating. She finally managed, "My family." The Duke's expression flickered, surprise, then understanding, then a quiet fury she sensed rather than saw. He reached into his coat and drew something from his inner pocket. When he pressed the small object into her palm, she gasped. It was a ring, heavy, warm from his touch, engraved with the Ravenswood crest, a soaring falcon framed by laurel leaves. "This," he said, "is a token of my word. Keep it close." Evelyne stared at the ring, confused. "I cannot accept this." "You must," he replied with calm insistence. "If any man questions your presence at my side, show them this. It will silence inquiries better than 1,000 explanations. But why would you? Because, he interrupted gently, I have seen this look before. On soldiers. On widows. On young men struck by poverty. Is the look of someone cornered by a fate they never agreed to live. A tremor went through Evelyne's breath. She slid the ring onto her finger, not because she trusted easily, but because his certainty left no room for fear. A whistle shrieked in the distance. The Duke glanced toward the main concourse. Your father's men are scouring every platform. We must keep moving. They stepped back into the crowd, but the station had transformed. Faces turned. Murmurs rippled. Several passengers had taken notice of the girl in the pink gown running beside the Duke. Some recognized him and whispered behind gloved hands. A few pointed directly at Evelyne. She's the Harcourt girl, someone hissed. Ran away from her own wedding. And he is helping her? A Duke, risking scandal for a stranger? Evelyne felt the heat of shame rise to her cheeks. Society's gaze was a blade, and she felt its edge sharpen with every passing second. The Duke slowed his pace and stepped between her and the cluster of onlookers, blocking their view with the sweep of his coat. Do not let their gossip define your worth, he said, voice soft enough that only she could hear it. Rumor is merely cowardice wearing a gentleman's coat. She had never heard words like that spoken by a nobleman, words that soothed rather than commanded. Her breath caught again, this time not from fear, but from a strange, unexpected warmth. But the reprieve was brief. The guard from earlier stormed onto the platform, pushing through the crowd. Lady Evelyne, one bellowed. By your father's command. The Duke's jaw tightened. We must leave now. He took her hand again and guided her swiftly toward the far end of the platform. Evelyne struggled to keep up, but her pulse steadied with every stride. She was not running alone now. She was not running blindly. She was running with a man who seemed prepared to shield her with his own reputation. They reached a hidden exit near the supply depot, where crates stacked high created a small passageway. The Duke ushered her into the narrow gap, then paused once they were concealed from view. Evelyne, still clutching his ring, forced her breath into some semblance of calm. I never meant for this to become public, she whispered. A runaway daughter, a refused marriage contract. I have become the scandal my mother always feared. The Duke turned toward her. Lantern light flickered against his face, illuminating the quiet intensity in his eyes. If your mother feared scandal more than she cherished your happiness, he said, then her fears were misplaced. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw no ridicule in his expression, no judgment, no smug satisfaction. Only a stillness, a depth, as though he understood far more than he let on. My lady, he said gently, tell me one thing. Did you run because you feared the man you were marrying, or because you feared the life that awaited you? Evelyne swallowed hard. The truth, when spoken aloud, felt like a confession wrung from the deepest part of her. Both, she whispered. Lord Ashcombe is cruel, and my family, they expect obedience, not joy. I was to be an ornament, not a wife. A symbol, not a person. Silence settled between them, broken only by the distant rumble of trains and the muffled shouts of men still searching. The Duke reached forward, lifting her chin with the barest touch, polite, respectful, yet devastatingly sincere. Then understand this. You are not an ornament, and you are not property. Her eyes burned. For a moment, she could not breathe. No man had ever spoken to her with such conviction. But before she could respond, hurried footsteps echoed near the depot. The Duke stiffened, listening. The guards were closer than either of them expected. He took one step back, assessing their dwindling options. They're circling around, he murmured. If we remain here, we will be found. And then, Evelyne whispered. Then, he said, lowering his voice even further, your freedom will be decided by men who do not deserve to choose your fate. The footsteps grew louder. The Duke extended his hand once more, the lantern glow catching the gold crest on her finger like a vow binding them both. My lady, he said softly, this is the last moment before everything changes. Are you willing to trust me? Evelyne looked at the approaching shadows. And she looked at him. and in the tightening air of that narrow passageway, she whispered the only answer that could lead them forward. Yes. The carriage lurched forward with a soft groan, its wheels splashing through shallow puddles as rain streaked the narrow streets beyond the station. Evelyne sat opposite the Duke, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the gold ring heavy against her finger like a promise she scarcely dared believe. The carriage lamp swayed, casting warm shadows that trembled with each uneven turn of the road. Outside, the city receded into mist, leaving only the sound of rain and the distant echo of pursuit. She felt suspended between breaths, between identities, unsure whether she was still a daughter fleeing her parents or something else entirely. The Duke removed his gloves with deliberate care, setting them beside him as though this moment deserved honesty. "We will not be followed," he said, voice calm but alert. "I have arranged matters." Evelyne watched him, struck by the absence of triumph in his tone. "You speak as though danger is a familiar companion," she said. He glanced toward the curtained window. "It is," he replied, "but so is choice." Silence settled, not awkward but weighted. The carriage rocked gently, drawing them closer without touch. Evelyne inhaled, then spoke before courage could desert her. "They intend to make me pay for my sister's happiness," she said. "She escaped. I was commanded to replace her." As though love could be reassigned. Her voice fractured, but she continued. "Lord Ashcombe was pleased. He called it efficiency." The Duke's jaw tightened. "Efficiency is often cruelty wearing a polite name," he said. "Did you tell them no?" "I did," she answered. "They told me obedience was gratitude." Rain struck the roof harder, a sudden percussion echoing her racing heart. The Duke leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "And you refused," he said. It was not a question. Evelyne nodded. "I would rather be lost than owned." Something softened in his gaze. "Then you and I share an understanding," he murmured. "I was raised to inherit obedience disguised as duty. A crown does not ask whether it fits the head beneath it." Evelyne looked up sharply. "You speak of her title as though it were a burden." He exhaled. "It is a weight," he said, "one I have carried willingly until today." The carriage slowed. Through the glass, the outline of Ravenswood's outer road emerged, slick with rain and shadowed by towering trees. Evelyne's breath caught. "You mean to hide me at your estate?" "I mean to shelter you," he corrected, "until you decide what you wish to become." The carriage rolled onward, and with each turn the tension inside Evelyne shifted, no longer pure fear, but something sharper, braver. She studied the Duke's profile, the controlled strength of his features. "If my family demands my return," she said, "they will not be gentle." "Nor will I," he replied quietly. "But understand this. I cannot choose for you." He turned, meeting her eyes. "Protection offered without freedom is merely another cage." The words settled deep within her. Evelyne felt herself shift, the frightened girl giving way to a woman listening to her own resolve. "Then let me choose to stay," she said. "For now." A flicker of approval crossed his face, restrained but unmistakable. The carriage slowed again, lantern light spilling across wet gravel. Voices sounded faintly beyond the trees, carried by the wind. Evelyne stiffened. "They have not stopped," she whispered. "No," the Duke said. "They will not." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. "Before we arrived, a messenger was sent." Her heart skipped. "To whom?" "To Lord Ashcombe," he answered. "He now knows you are here." The carriage halted. Rain drummed like a warning. Evelyne's fingers tightened around the ring. Fear surged, but it was different now, edged with defiance. She lifted her chin. "Then he will come," she said. The Duke opened the door, offering his hand once more. "Yes," he replied, "and when he does, the world will see whether a woman may choose her fate or whether power alone decides." Evelyne stepped down into the rain, heart pounding, knowing the shelter she had been offered was also a battlefield. She did not look back. Ahead, Ravenswood rose through mist and torchlight, waiting like a held breath. The Duke followed, his presence steady at her side. In that moment, as thunder murmured overhead, Evelyne understood the truth she had been running toward. Freedom was no longer escape. It was confrontation, and somewhere beyond the trees, a man who believed her life already belonged to him was preparing to claim it. Evelyne drew a slow breath, rain cooling her flushed skin as resolve settled into her bones. She was afraid, but fear no longer ruled her. It sharpened her senses, clarified the stakes, reminded her why she had fled in the first place. Beside her, the Duke surveyed the darkened drive, his posture composed yet alert, as though he welcomed the reckoning approaching. "Whatever follows," he said quietly, "remember that you did not arrive here by weakness." Evelyne met his gaze, something fierce and grateful rising between them. "Nor will I leave by it," she answered. The wind stirred the trees, carrying with it the distant promise of confrontation. Lamps flickered along the drive, revealing the path ahead one uncertain step at a time. Evelyne moved forward, no longer running, no longer hiding. Each footfall felt deliberate, claimed, as though she were stepping into herself at last. Behind the manor walls, voices stirred, alliances braced, and judgments sharpened. The Duke remained beside her, silent now, but unwavering. And as the gates loomed ahead, Evelyne understood that what awaited her inside was not merely shelter, but a choice that would demand everything she possessed. She tightened her grip on the ring, feeling its weight ground her to the moment. Whatever Lord Ashcombe intended, whatever her family demanded, this ground would not yield without her consent. Thunder rolled once more, distant but certain. Evelyne stepped through the gates, heart steady, eyes lifted, ready to be. Rain softened into a fine mist by morning, clinging to the windows of Ravenswood Manor like breath held too long. Evelyne woke to the muted hush of a house that listened rather than spoke, its corridors carrying warmth without intrusion. The room she had been given faced the winter garden, where pale roses bowed beneath droplets and stone statues watched with patient eyes. She sat at the edge of the bed, hands folded, the Duke's ring catching the early light with a quiet steadiness that calmed her pulse. When she stepped into the corridor, servants paused and bowed, their courtesy precise yet kind. No questions followed her. No whispers trailed her steps. The absence of scrutiny unsettled her more than gossip ever had. In her family's house, kindness was measured, rationed. Here, it appeared unforced, as though dignity were the expected state of things. The Duke waited in the gallery beyond, framed by tall windows and the scent of polished wood. He had changed into a dark waistcoat, his posture composed, his eyes already alert to her presence. "You slept," he said, not as a statement of relief but acknowledgement. "Enough," she replied, for the first time in days. They walked together beneath portraits of ancestors who stared with painted certainty, men and women bound by duty and inheritance. Evelyne felt their gazes weigh upon her, measuring her worth. "They would not approve," she murmured. "Of me." "Approval," the Duke said evenly, "has rarely been the measure of justice." He stopped beside a window overlooking the front drive. Beyond the gates, the road lay empty, slick with last night's rain. "My counsel arrives shortly." Her breath tightened. "To discuss me. To discuss consequences," he corrected. "You are not an item on an agenda." He turned to face her fully. "But I will not pretend there is no cost." She nodded, bracing herself. "My presence here places you in opposition to powerful men." "It places me in alignment with my conscience," he replied. "I have lived too long allowing others to define necessity." They entered the council chamber together. The long table gleamed beneath chandeliers, papers arranged with clinical precision. The men rose at the Duke's entrance, their expressions guarded. Evelyne remained standing near the door, spine straight, chin lifted, refusing the impulse to shrink. The Duke did not seat himself until she did. One councilman cleared his throat. "Your Grace, reports have reached us. A young woman sheltered under your roof. A matter of irregularity. A matter of protection," the Duke said calmly. Another voice followed, sharper. "Lord Ashcombe has sent notice. He claims lawful intent." Evelyne felt the words strike like a blow. The Duke's gaze did not leave the speaker. "Lawful intent does not extend to coercion." Murmurs rippled. She is her family's responsibility, someone argued. You risk embroiling Ravenswood in scandal. The Duke's hand rested lightly on the table, steady as stone. I risk far more by surrendering a woman who asked for refuge. He turned slightly toward Evelyne. She is here by choice. The room fell quiet. Evelyne stood, the sound of her chair against the floor ringing louder than she expected. I will speak, she said, her voice trembling once, then settling. I was commanded to replace my sister in a marriage arranged to repair fortune. I refused. I ran. If that makes me improper, then impropriety is a small price for breath. Some faces softened, others hardened. The Duke watched her with a restrained pride that steadied her further. A servant entered, whispering urgently. The Duke listened, then nodded. Lord Ashcombe approaches the gates. The council erupted. Voices overlapped. The Duke rose, lifting a hand for silence. Then he will be received, he said, openly. Evelyne's heart pounded as they moved to the portico. The sky had cleared to a pale, unforgiving blue. Horses stamped beyond the gates. Lord Ashcombe dismounted with theatrical confidence, his coat immaculate, his smile sharp. Your Grace, he called, I have come for what is mine. Evelyne stepped forward before the Duke could speak. I am not yours, she said. Her voice carried across the stone. I never was. Ashcombe's eyes narrowed. Your family disagrees. Then let them speak for themselves, the Duke replied, his tone controlled. Here, we honor consent. Ashcombe laughed, brittle and incredulous. You would defy custom for a girl who ran? I would, the Duke said, stepping beside Evelyne, defy cruelty. The standoff stretched, the air taut. Ashcombe's gaze flicked to the ring on Evelyne's hand, recognition dawning. So, he sneered, this is your solution. Hide her behind your crest. The Duke's voice softened, dangerous in its restraint. She stands beside me because she chose to. Evelyne felt the truth of it anchor her. She did not look away. Ashcombe's smile faded. He turned, signaling his men back. This is not finished, he said. Power remembers. So do women, Evelyne answered. Ashcombe departed in a fury of hooves and dust. The gates closed. A breath released across the gathered witnesses. The Duke turned to Evelyne, his expression unreadable. This choice, he said quietly, will follow you. She met his eyes. Then I will follow it. The council dispersed, unsettled but silent. The Duke led her into the winter garden, where sunlight caught the remaining dew. What you did, he said, was brave. It was necessary, she replied. I am tired of being spared and never chosen. He hesitated, then spoke. If you remain here, the world will assume intentions I have not yet named. Evelyne's breath caught. And if I leave, I will help you, he said, without claim. The space between them filled with possibilities, fragile and bright. Evelyne closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of the ring, the warmth of shelter, the echo of Ashcombe's threat. She opened them with resolve. I will stay, she said, not as refuge, as witness. The Duke inclined his head, acceptance and something deeper passing between them. The future waited, silent, watchful, and irrevocably changed. The gates of Ravenswood did not open again that night, yet the estate felt as though the world pressed close against its walls. Darkness gathered early, thickened by clouds that refused the moon. Evelyne stood at the tall window of the winter gallery, watching torchlight flicker along the distant road, her reflection wavering in the glass like a woman deciding who she would become. The ring on her finger no longer felt borrowed. It felt chosen. The Duke joined her without announcing himself. His presence had a way of quieting rooms, not by command, but by gravity. They will not come tonight, he said. Ashcombe prefers daylight when he believes he is right. Evelyne exhaled, not in relief, but preparation. Then he will come tomorrow. Yes. He paused, measuring his words. And so will your family. The truth landed with weight. She turned to face him fully, candlelight carving his features into planes of resolve and restraint. I will not be hidden, she said. Not again. I would never ask that, he replied. But what follows will not be gentle. I know. Her voice was steady. I have been gentle my entire life. Morning broke with a brutal clarity. Ravenswood's great hall filled with witnesses. Councilmen returned, household staff aligned along the walls, neighbors drawn by rumor. Evelyne entered beside the Duke, her posture straight, her expression composed. Whispers stirred, but none dared rise above the Duke's measured calm. Ashcombe arrived first, all polished confidence and practiced outrage. He did not bow to Evelyne. He barely acknowledged her humanity. "Your Grace," he began, "this matter has festered long enough. The woman belongs with her family, to be married as agreed. She belongs to herself," the Duke answered evenly. Ashcombe's smile sharpened. "Custom disagrees. So do the laws of my duchy," the Duke replied. "Consent is not a courtesy. It is a requirement." Evelyne felt the room's attention shift, no longer fixed on the men alone. She stepped forward, lifting her chin. "I refuse the marriage," she said clearly. "I refuse it still. No contract signed without my will's claim upon me." A stir ran through the hall. Ashcombe's eyes flashed. "Your will is compromised," he snapped. "By fear. By influence. By clarity," Evelyne corrected. "I know precisely what I am choosing." The Duke turned to the assembly. "Let it be recorded," he said, "that Lady Evelyne Harcourt stands here of her own accord." A door opened. Evelyne's parents entered, her mother pale, her father rigid with affront. The sight struck her harder than Ashcombe's threats. Years of obedience rose, demanding their due. She breathed through it. Her mother spoke first, voice trembling. "Evelyne, come home." Evelyne met her gaze with sorrow, not submission. "Home is not a place that sells me." Her father bristled. "You shame us." "I was shamed when you decided my body was currency," Evelyne said. "I will not carry that anymore." The Duke's voice did not interrupt. He allowed her the space. The courage grew in her chest, fed by his silence as much as his protection. "I loved you," she continued quietly. "I still do. But love without listening is not love. It is ownership." The hall held its breath. Ashcombe laughed hollow. "This is theatrics," he said. "You will regret defying me." The Duke stepped forward at last, placing himself unmistakably between Evelyne and the man who believed her prize. "You are dismissed," he said. "Leave my house." Ashcombe sneered. "You would throw away alliances for a woman?" "I would," the Duke said, and the simplicity of it carried more force than any threat. Ashcombe's face hardened. He turned sharply, signaling retreat, his promise of retribution lingering like smoke. Evelyne watched him go without flinching. When the doors closed, the Duke faced the room. "This matter ends here," he said. "Any who wish to contest it may do so through lawful channels. Ravenswood will not traffic in coercion." The witnesses dispersed slowly, subdued. Evelyne's parents lingered. Her mother's eyes shone. "You are changed," she whispered. "I am," Evelyne replied. "And I hope one day you will be proud of that." They left, grief and reckoning in their wake. The hall emptied. The Duke and Evelyne stood alone at its center, the echo of what had passed vibrating in the stone. "You were extraordinary," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I was honest. That is rarer." They walked into the garden as afternoon softened. Sunlight filtered through bare branches, gilding the paths. Evelyne stopped near the fountain, uncertainty flickering back into her gaze. "What happens now?" she asked. "I will not be a guest forever." "No," he agreed. "Nor would I ask you to be." She studied him, searching for expectation, finding none. "If I stay," she said carefully, "it must be as my own woman, not as a shield for your reputation, not as a symbol." He met her seriousness with equal gravity. "If you stay," he said, "it will be because you choose me. And if you do not, I will ensure your safety regardless." The honesty in his words loosened something in her chest. She stepped closer. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Not of you. Of wanting something I was taught to refuse." He lifted her hand, reverent, formal, as though the moment itself demanded respect. "Wanting is not weakness," he said. "It is direction." She looked at their joined hands, at the ring that had begun as protection and become promise. "Then hear my direction," she said softly. "I choose to remain. I choose to learn who I am without fear." and I choose, if you will have me, to see what grows between us." The Duke's composure finally cracked, just enough to reveal the depth beneath. He bowed his head, not as a subject, but as a man receiving a gift. "I will spend my life worthy of that choice," he said. They stood together as the sun dipped, the future no longer a threat, but an invitation. Somewhere beyond the walls, power recalculated, alliances shifted, and consequences gathered. But inside Ravenswood, Evelyne felt a calm she had never known. When evening bells rang, the Duke released her hand with deliberate restraint. "Tomorrow," he said, "the world will begin asking questions." Evelyne smiled, small and fierce. "Then tomorrow," she replied, "I will answer them." And in the quiet that followed, the truth settled between them like a vow, not spoken aloud, but unmistakably made.